Okay, this is the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to be making about the differences between the Civ 5 base game and LekMod, specifically the LekMod that's played in the No Quitters multiplayer environment. This applies pretty similarly to the NQ mod and its versions. Essentially, the idea is you have these multiplayer mods that are different from the base game. How are they different? Why are they different? What is the impact on the actual gameplay? One of the big problems that the NQ group faces, like Civ multiplayer as a whole faces, is that this is an old game. It's a shrinking game. You have a shrinking number of players. So players who enjoy the game, like the game, who want to try out multiplayer, it's hard for them to get into a mod that's essentially much different in strategy, in tactics, in the overall design philosophy of it. So this series of videos is essentially saying, okay, what are the differences, and how does that manifest itself in the game itself? So that newer players or players who are looking to get better, they can sort of take a look at what they're doing wrong or what they can do differently so they can adapt the way they're playing from the base game to the multiplayer environment and succeed. Essentially, I'm working in rough order of importance, which usually corresponds to rough order of how it occurs in the game. That is, things that happen early are more impactful. You know, I'll say it again and again, Civ is a snowball game. And especially, one of the big differences between the base version and the Lek or NQ versions is that the snowball aspect of it is amplified quite considerably. The game gets faster, you get more food, more hammers, more science quicker. And so if you want to keep up, your sort of conceptions about what's a good game have to change. Your conceptions of, you know, what's a good time to get your NC, or what's a good time to have your workshops, etc., they need to change because the game is simply faster. A lot of that comes down to what I think is the biggest change from the base game to the NQ mod, NQ and LekMod, and the NQ multiplayer group, is that it's played on Hellblazer's map. Hellblazer is a map designer. He's essentially made all the maps that the NQ group plays on. What it is a modified version of the Pangaea map script that is essentially better tailored for multiplayer balance. And what it does is it essentially removes a lot of the annoying design features of the original Pangaea. You don't have a lot of inland seas. You don't have these massive intercutting bays. You don't have these sort of very narrow land areas where people are isolated. You don't have sort of narrow peninsulas or isthmuses that isolate players, prevent player communication, things like this. It also adds more resources, more of that sort of what I call snowball potential, and generally sort of, if you're sort of looking from a general perspective, it sort of supersizes the map. It makes everything bigger and everything's got more. There's more resources, bigger landmass. Yeah, that's the basic design philosophy of it. So what essentially does this mean? Why is it so impactful? Because essentially the map determines your strategy. The map determines your overall gameplay. The reason why I focus so much on scouting in the early game, the reason why I so strongly recommend building 2 scouts right away, is because your map essentially decides your game. That's what decides your policy choices. That's what decides what your priorities are in terms of building infrastructure, or building wonders, or building army. What informs your policy decisions, your sort of long-term technology paths, and overall your potential to win the game. So, what does all these effects of the Hellblazer's map do? Because perhaps the most immediately visible thing is when you spawn turn 0, you have a much better cap than you do in the base game. Take a look at this cap. This is not a particularly great cap. This is an okay cap by the new map standards. But it has 1, 2, 3 grain resources, 1, 2, 3, 4 stable resources, and 4 luxuries. That is 3 of my regional dies, plus assault. That would be an insane cap from the base game perspective. Normally in the base game you spawn with 3 luxuries. You maybe get 2 or 3 if you're lucky of these bonus resources. You're guaranteed an iron, you're guaranteed a horses, and that's it. This is so much stronger than the base game capital, which means your start is faster, you get your settlers out quicker, you're building wonders faster, you're building workers faster, you're building caravans faster. It's like a rocket ship propelling your entire game. This is one of the reasons why I so strongly recommend against moving your capital when you are first spawn into the Hellblazers map, just because the sort of capital area is coded to be so strong. It's what's called a legendary start. That it's really, there are very rare cases where moving actually yields you a benefit, just because the start is so strong. And not only do you get all these resources you see here, you also get guaranteed coal, guaranteed aluminum, and 14 oil within those first 3 rings. So you have very strong incentives to remain in place. Okay, so that's just the capital. What about the areas around your capital? Now not only is your capital stronger, but the areas around your capital, your expansions, are stronger as well, because they've got more resources, they've got more luxuries, they've got more fresh water. This is a feature of the Hellblazers map. You see a lot more rivers, a lot more lakes, which means more cities with gardens, which means better great person generation. Again, this is sort of determining your whole game. It is very common with the original Pangaea map that you might only have 1 or 2 good expansion spots. And even those would be inferior to these sort of basic expansions I've settled here, which are good cities but not great cities. These would be considered great cities in the base game. That's just the sort of the level of the creep, the balance creep in the map. What this means is, again, your focus is on getting cities out earlier. Because those cities are going to be so much stronger than in the base game, it's really, really worth it to build those early settlers. That's why I focus so much on, say, building workers and settlers, not wonders. Because that's what's going to win you the game in the long run. Because the rest of the map is so strong, getting out multiple cities, even if you're playing tradition, is going to stay strong. In general, as well, you can't really see it here because I don't have a ton of land, but in a lot of maps, you will have considerably more room than you can on a base map. That is on the original Pangaea, which of course makes wide play with either tradition or liberty, or even honor is possible to play wide, piety. All those sort of wide plays where you're settling 6, 7, 8 cities all of a sudden become so much stronger because you have essentially all these cities that are better cities for you to settle. You've got more luxuries, you've got more resources, you've got more fresh water. That makes settling those extra cities, playing with more cities, so much stronger than just staying on 2 or 3, which was quite common in the base Pangaea, the base Civ. So that's essentially the gist of the map changes. There's just more. There's more resources, more fresh water, more space. And that really benefits the wide play over the tall play. Almost everyone would go tradition in the base Civ game, and that was simply because having 2 or 3, good cities was so much stronger than having 6 or 7 mediocre cities. Now, it's very possible to have 6 or 7 great cities. That accelerates the snowball, it accelerates the science game, the production game. So now your sort of standards of what is good land are quite substantially changed. I see a lot of new players who struggle with this. That is, they're still stuck in the mentality of, I'm going to go for Great Library first, and maybe then I'll build some settlers. Or, I'm going to stay on one city until I have my national college, and then I'll build some settlers. Strategies that were workable in the base game because the land around you wasn't as good. Now, because of how strong settling those additional cities are, those are notably inferior plays. I would say, 99% of the time, You want to build settlers before you build a single wonder. You want to get all your cities out before you build your NC. This is just the reality of the game, the reality of what's strongest. And that's all shaped by the map. That's sort of the perspective you want to have. That your strategy is shaped by the map, rather than you coming into the game with a predetermined strategy. You don't want to enter a game and think, I'm going to plant just 2 cities. Because what if you have the room and the quality of land for 6 or 7 cities? You want to get your settlers out and really establish yourself early. Make the most of these changes in the map. Because for me, this is the #1 biggest change to the current LekMod. Is the map, essentially. What determines the entire game.